Hello, welcome from my side. Welcome to Minimal APIs with Microsoft.NET. My name is Christian. Here you see my latest released book, Professional C# and .NET 2021 edition. It's a 2021 edition, but I'm continuously updating this book, and the current version is on the current version of the source code available on GitHub is on .NET 7. But I'm also just starting to write a new book about microservices with .NET and Microsoft Azure. You can get in contact via Twitter, LinkedIn, or via my blog. And during this session, if you have any questions, you can directly write the questions to the chat window. I will have a look at the chat window, and I will also be available later on after the session for some discussions. What I want to tell you today about the minimal API. The minimal API, it's minimal, so can it be used on a larger scale? Does it replace the controllers, or should we stay with the controllers? And I want to show you here the different iterations of the minimal API. We start with .NET 6. What were the new features of C# and .NET to make the minimal API possible? Then we continue with .NET 7 and have a glimpse look into .NET 8. In this hour, I just have a small number of slides. I will give you many code samples. And yeah, the code samples are all available on GitHub. So yeah, let's start with a sample. Let me open the terminal first. Okay, let me move to our repository. Okay. .NET New. .NET New. First, have a look at .NET version. Here, I'm currently running preview 3 of .NET, but the first sample will be a .NET 6 application. So .NET New Web API, for .NET 6.0. And I'm using the minimal API and create a weather and books project. Okay. Now let's have a look at the minimal API of this application. Let me move Visual Studio to the screen. Okay. Open project. Source code, web and books. Okay. Here we already have some weather information. You see top level statements here that have been new with C# 9 and new with .NET 6 is the web application class, the web application and the web application builder. So with this, we could get rid of the main method, use top level statements, get rid of using the host class with the startup class. The host class still is behind the scenes within the web application class. We register our dependency injection container here and create the application where we start configuring the middleware for ASP.NET. And now a new API is here, map get. Yeah, previous to .NET 6, there was only one overload here, and this overload had a request delegate. The new version available since .NET 6 is the version with the delegate parameter. With the delegate parameter, we can pass any delegate. And what changed here with C#, C# 10, is natural type delegates. Natural type delegates, there's no need to cast a lambda expression. You can assign any parameters here, any return types to this delegate type without having the need for a cast or without creating a new instance of func or action. So the minimal API here is a weather forecast with a random weather information. Run. Okay. Everything in one simple file program C#. The API is ready, but it's very simple. It's very small. Let's create something bigger. Let me create a new class. Book. But instead of creating a class to not write that much code, let me create a record class using a primary constructor with a book ID, a title, and a publisher. So this creates properties of a book ID, a title, and a publisher. And these properties have a get and an init accessor, in addition to some other code that's created from the record here. Okay. In addition to that, let's create a database. Manage NuGet packages. I'm using anti-framework core SQL Server. Here, I could use 7.0 with this .NET 6 project. When you look at the project file, the .NET 6 project, I could use .NET 7. I could use anti-framework core version 7, because anti-framework core version 7 has a dependency on .NET 6. So this could be used here. But let's be on the safe side. I'm using .NET 6, anti-framework 6, SQL Server here. What you typically have in a .NET 6 application. And in addition to that, I'm also adding the design NuGet package. So this should now be the same version as the other one. Otherwise, we would really have a conflict. Okay. And let's create a context here. Which derives from the base class DB context from this namespace. And let's create a constructor using for dependency injection DB context options. And call the base class. And let's define a DB set property of book named books. And here I'm calling the base method to initialize this instead of using a get and set accessor. Have a property with a get accessor. Okay. The application settings, I already created the database with some books. So yeah, connection strings, default connection. database, but not this database name. Global Azure Books is the database name. Okay. And now let's configure the container builder services. Instead of using @db context, I'm using @SQL Server here. This is a new version since .NET 6. I can directly assign, use the template parameter, the books context. And instead of passing options, I pass directly the connection string here. Builder configuration, a get connection string, and it's the books connection. Okay. Now let's create an API for this context class here. Build. Okay. Let me scaffold this, new scaffolded item, API. And here you have an option to create a controller with the entity framework, or you can create an API with read-write endpoints using the entity framework. So this creates a minimal API using the entity framework. Okay. With this, the model class is the book record here. The endpoint class, let me create the books endpoint class and the context, it's the books context. Use OpenAPI, that's fine. Okay. Save the solution. So what we get here is a new endpoint which reads and writes to the database using this context. And this endpoint is mapped using a mapper method within, usually it does this. Books endpoint, use OpenAPI. Okay. Some months ago, there has been some problems here, but now usually there isn't a problem, but I'm using a preview version of Visual Studio. So what could be the solution here is to stop Visual Studio and start it again. Open this Weather and Books project. Okay. There's a book class. Okay. And the NuGet packages are in the correct version. Okay, so yeah, that's fine. Add new scaffolded item. One more try. Book endpoint. Create a new book endpoints. Okay, and the context. Add. Okay, now there's some issue, but of course I have a backup. Don't want to waste the time now. Let's take an existing project which has this stage here. So switch to part 1, book sample. I created exactly this. Okay, so here I have a book record. Okay, I have the book's context, and this also creates here normal creating fills the database, but yeah, I already deleted this information from the database. We don't need this here. And what's created is the book endpoints. This class book endpoints with this static extension method. Map book endpoints. This extends our endpoint root builder, and this way, after the map get here, these book endpoints is mapped. So you find all the get for a list of books, get for one book, and yeah, there's an issue it still has when creating when using records. So records, you need to work a little bit different with the put. All the other things are fine. Just this here is created incorrect. Book ID, and use the book ID here. With this one, using a record, you have to change a little bit. That's why you should use classes using Entity Framework instead of records, because a record is immutable. And here, if it's retrieved from the database and then you add another one, it's a different book. So, but we can still use records here. If I add a node tracking as node tracking, and I invoke instead of the method, use the method find with node tracking. Find always uses the context. So I'm using a single or default async and pass book ID equals book ID, and change this to lowercase here, as well as pass the book ID here to map this ID, to map this root parameter to this parameter here. What you see here with this delegate parameter, we have an int parameter, a book parameter, and the context. The context is coming from the dependency injection container. The book is coming from the HTTP body, and the book ID is coming from the root. Can you have here any parameter as long as they are filled somehow? And you can also use attributes from route to have this documented from body and from service for the book's context. But these parameters, these attributes are only required if there's a conflict, if there's some duplicate and it's not clear where this information is coming from. But otherwise, yeah, just can get rid of that. Okay. So natural type delegates are new. And you also see here a results type. Because with this class, we don't derive from the controller base class. The controller base class, you get some helper methods to return results and some other things. You don't have this here. That's why we have a results factory class. And using this results factory class, we can return different results here. Results dot accepted, okay, not found, and so on. Okay, let me start this application. We have a Swagger definition. The Swagger definition for the book sample with books and weather information API book, get all the books, try it out, execute. Yeah, we access the set property from the anti-framework context and retrieve all the books from the database. We can create a new post, a new book, try it out. Pragmatic microservices with C# and Azure. Packed pub. In the chat window, I've seen the question, do you write a new book? This will be the new book, Pragmatic Microservices, execute. And it's written to the database. The response code is 201. Book is created, resource is created with this book identifier. Okay. To have all this information, what's returned from this API code 201 is returned. And here, get 200, 44 not found, put 2444 no content not found. This information needs to be added to the Open API description, and this is done using .NET 6 via the produces method here. Produces 200 okay, not found, produces not found, no content. And what you also see here, I added this. This is not created automatically. I added a tag. This is also important for the Open API description with tags books. So here we find one category for the books API and one category for the weather API. Otherwise, everything without the tags, everything would just be in one list here. Okay. Let's move back to the slides. So the minimal API started with .NET 6. One version before that, top-level statements have been introduced with C#9. Top-level statements where you don't need a program class, you don't need a main method, but the templates didn't use this. And starting with .NET 6, many of the templates use top-level statements by default to make the application smaller, the code you need to write smaller. To use this with the Open API, the web application and web application builder have been introduced. Otherwise, you still would have the starter plus and couldn't write everything to just one file. For the new versions of the map get, map post, passing a delegate without having a cast there, natural typed lambdas have been introduced. And yeah, for ASP.NET Core, for the minimal API, there's a new result, a factory class. Okay. So from here, let's move over to .NET 7. So the minimal API is still, you can have it in a different file, but it's still minimal. and you have to do with every API call, still have to do a lot of common functionality. So let's change this book sample here to use .NET 7. Okay, let me update the NuGet packages. Updates, not using the pre-releases at the moment. So here as a new version and the framework core design 7.7. Okay, web code generation, update. Okay, accept. Okay. What's new here is you can group functionality of different APIs, like here the map-get, map-put. There's some common things in that here. For example, the tags. Routes.map-group, defining a route for books, and with tags books is the thing that's common here, equals. Okay. In addition to something like this, what's typically common with all the APIs is require authorization, caching information, rate limiting, what you can enable or disable, some things that's common for the complete group here. Instead of using the root parameter for the endpoint root builder here, I'm now using the group. We use the link books instead of API books, and I'm just using a slash here. Check the books context. Can get rid of the tags and do a group on map get for the parameter here. Book ID, pass this on to here. Remove the with tags. Okay. Before I continue here, other than the grouping, there's another great feature. So here we have a produces status code 200. To have this information in the OpenAPI description. You can get rid of this one if you return, instead of using the results class, if you use a typed results. Okay. So this is a new results type, new with .NET 7, and pass the books.toList async here with an await. Get rid of that. So using typed results, you have this information inside the OpenAPI description. This map get returns okay. Passing the data here. Here, I'm passing two possible result codes. So get rid of the producers. Change this to typed results.ok and typed results.notfound. Now it's looking really messy here. The request delegate does not take two arguments. What's the issue here? The request delegate is the wrong overload. So instead, we need the delegate overload and define a return type here. So what should this method return? This is an asynchronous API, so it should return a task. And to get this information of multiple typed results, you need to specify here a results. There's a new generic results class, which can be used to pass not one, but 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 generic parameters what to return. Like here, okay, and results okay, and the generic type, and not found. Okay, of course it's results okay, and results not found. Okay, results okay, you pass some data. This is the model here. So it's a book map get for a simple book. Something's wrong here. Results okay, and not found. Okay, just messed this up in the moment. It's results. Okay, just one moment. Let me also show you the repository for this hour. This repository is Codebreaker app, is the organization, and inside this, there's this public repository. It's already public available, global Azure Austria 2023. There's the book sample with this new endpoint result. Okay, book and not found. Task results. Let's go back here. Task of results. Okay. Task results. Okay. Return an okay with a book or not found. All this information now with this return type, a new feature with C#10 with the natural type lambdas. You can specify a return type with a lambda expression, which is used here. And similar here, the tags can be removed. All the producers use a typed results, no content, and typed results not found, and specify a return type, which is a task of results not found, and results and what is the other one? Not found, no content. No content. Okay. Typed results. Okay. So this is one important enhancement, and also not routes, but use the group instead, to use the common functionality here. Instead of changing this here with all the different APIs, let me open the existing project with part 2. Book sample. So here the grouping has been updated. Map group / books and map get based on this group, returning a typed result. A map get with a book ID, returning okay or not found. Typed results, not found, no content. Group map post, receive the book from the body, the context is injected, typed result created. Okay, let's start the application here. So get access the same database, get all the books here. Try it out, execute. It's in a breakpoint here. Continue. And you get all the books from the database. Okay. A feature from Visual Studio in the times of .NET 7 or a little bit later with Visual Studio, we have a new other window, an API Explorer. Stop it here. Don't stop it. Need to have it running. Okay. Other windows. It's an endpoint explorer here. With the endpoint explorer from this project, I see all the endpoints. So the weather forecast, books, post books, a get with a book ID. Let's have a look into it. So this also works with the controller. This is not a controller-based endpoint. This is a the method mapbook endpoint with this file path. Can also navigate to here and open editor and generate a request. Generate a request. You open an HTTP Visual Studio HTTP editor. So defining a variable here, for example, host address, and use the get method / books book ID, and add this one here. Let's do it first. Get all the books. Commands. Get all books. Get book sample books. Get a book with a book ID and pass, example directly pass 42. Call this. And you find the results directly here with Visual Studio. You don't need to open another page. You can, you have a file with your project you can use here. Get just one book, or yeah, the book ID. If you don't find this, get this book, just one book, or do create a new book post, book sample, books, content type, application JSON. Now let me create here from this post link some JSON information. Copy this over here. Don't need this block. ID, just the title. And the publisher. Okay, post, insert into, and this is returned from the API professional C# with this ID, and I can use this ID here. Can also create a variable. Pass this number and use this variable here, book ID, make a GET request, have this returned directly from a simple editor without leaving Visual Studio. You have this HTTP editor with its Endpoints Explorer. A similar functionality is available with Visual Studio Code. There's an extension with Visual Studio Code, and this extension with Visual Studio Code is already longer available than we have this feature here inside Visual Studio. Okay. Some more features with .NET 7. Let me open here another project. GamesAPI.NET. You can create a filter. So here with this a little bit bigger project, there's a games endpoint, and this endpoint has an endpoint filter. There's a logging filter. There's another endpoint filter. So here, a game move validation filter, a game move exception filter. So inside this code, you don't see any exception handling, but this is done from a filter. So get the code simpler, game move exception filter. A filter implements an endpoint filter. And here we validate the parameters, return log some error, return typed results not found. Here we call the next filter or the final. It's just like middleware. You implement middleware within an API and create classes to handle your special cases. So let's get back to the slides. With .NET 7, we have grouped endpoints, typed results, filters, the Visual Studio Endpoints Explorer. And what you can also do is a .NET Publish without having a Docker file. .NET Publish directly supports Docker. There's no need to have a Docker file with that. You can directly do a .NET Publish to create a Docker image with your .NET 7 application. And now an important last part is .NET 8. Let me open a project here from the third part. Part 3. Okay. There's the book sample with AOT. This sample has been updated to .NET 8 with the option publish AOT true. And some more features, like here, instead of creating a builder, creating a slim builder, which is just smaller, doesn't add all the interfaces, doesn't add any logger. You explicitly have to add the logger you need. Doesn't add any logger. You Just add the ones you need. If you run in a Docker container, it's probably many things are not required. And here's, I think you already heard it from a previous session. Here's the JSON serializer configured. So this is this one here, a source generator for the JSON serializer. And this way you can create native code for your applications. And yeah, this is the most important feature, native AOT with .NET 8. Create native applications directly from .NET, but many things are not working yet. And many things will not work with the .NET 8 timeframe. So, as a summary, minimal APIs have a bright future, not only for small services, and .NET 8 AOT brings big advantage for a few of your services. I'm available for questions in the other room. I will join you in the other room where we can discuss any questions. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining the minimal API sessions.